My sister kicked my 16-year-old son out of our mother's final family dinner because he was not named as a cash beneficiary. By midnight, I had found $380,000 missing from the estate accounting she wanted me to approve. Owen's question had not been about money. He had been standing beside the dining room wall in my mother's nearly empty house on the last evening of a short post-closing occupancy period, looking at the pale rectangle where her cedar chest had sat for most of his childhood. The estate had to turn the keys over to the buyer the next morning. "Did someone already inventory Grandma's chest?" he asked. The room changed before anyone answered. My older sister Denise stopped carving the roast she had brought in from a catering tray. Her daughter Brooke looked down at her plate. Brooke's fiancé held his water glass halfway to his mouth. Two of our cousins exchanged the kind of glance relatives use when they sense a fight and want to know whether they should stop it or remember every word. Denise set the carving knife down. "This dinner is for the people handling Mom's estate," she said, "not teenagers counting what they might get." Owen's face tightened, but he kept his voice soft. "I wasn't counting anything. Grandma showed me the photographs in that chest every Sunday." "You are not a beneficiary," Denise said. "You can eat somewhere else." She lifted a covered takeout container from the sideboard and placed it beside the back door. "You can sit on the porch," she added, "or wait in the car." Owen reached for his coat. That was the part that changed me, not Denise's voice. I had heard that voice for 40 years, the one that turned disagreement into disloyalty and questions into accusations. It was the way Owen moved without arguing, as though preserving everybody else's comfort was already his responsibility. I crossed the room, took the container away from him, and put it back on the sideboard. "We're leaving together," I said. Denise gave a tired laugh. "Of course you are. You always turn everything into a principle." "No," I said. "You turned a place at the table into an inheritance category." The estate accounts stayed out of the argument. So did threats about court or accusations about the cedar chest. I thanked the cousins who had come, collected Owen's backpack, and walked out with him. In the car, he stared through the passenger window until we reached the end of my mother's street. "I really wasn't asking what she left me," he said. "I know. I just wanted to know where the pictures went." "I know that too." He nodded once and said nothing else. 23 minutes later, while we were still driving home through the outer edge of Columbus, my phone chimed with an email from Denise. The subject line read, "Final distribution, signature required." Attached were a beneficiary summary, a proposed distribution schedule, and a release approving her administration of our mother's estate. Denise's message said she needed my signature within 10 days. If I delayed, she warned, legal expenses would reduce both of our inheritances. I would have skimmed it before that dinner. For 11 months, I had let Denise manage the probate process because she had lived closest to our mother and handled most of the daily care during the final years. The probate docket showed approved extensions, while the house sale, final tax work, and remaining property administration stayed open. I worked as a financial controller for a regional construction company. I understood reconciliations, cash controls, vendor payments, and audit trails. At work, nobody moved $6 without a code and an approval. At home, I had treated my sister's sacrifice as a substitute for documentation. After I put Owen to bed, I opened every attachment. Our mother, Margaret Bennett, had died at 78. Her probate estate included the proceeds from her house, several brokerage and savings accounts, her car, personal property auction proceeds, refunds, and a handful of smaller receivables. The filed inventory valued the gross estate at approximately $1,860,000. I opened the closing statement from the sale of the house. I added the brokerage liquidation confirmations. I entered the mortgage payoff, property taxes, funeral costs, medical bills, ordinary maintenance, legal fees, insurance, and the expenses Denise had previously disclosed. Based on the records I had, the estate should have held roughly $1,450,000 before final distribution adjustments. Denise's summary reflected $1,070,000. I ran the calculation again. Then I opened a new spreadsheet and rebuilt it from the beginning. The difference remained $380,000. It was too large to be a closing adjustment and too exact to be a mistake caused by rounding. It did not mean my sister had stolen $380,000. Probate accounting is not that simple. Inventory value is not final value. Expenses arrive late. Reserves can be legitimate. A transfer can be proper even when the summary describing it is poor. But $380,000 had left the arithmetic without leaving an explanation. One line in Denise's summary read, "Care and transition expenses, previously discussed. No schedule, no dates, no recipients, no supporting documents." Below the distribution page was a release stating that I approved all acts, transactions, payments, reimbursements, professional fees, interim distributions, reserves, and related party services undertaken during administration. I read that paragraph 3 times. Then I saved Denise's email and attachments in a folder she could not access. I downloaded every earlier estate update. I copied the public probate inventory and docket entries. I preserved our text messages about the house, the auction, the brokerage accounts, and the sale proceeds. I did not call Denise. Instead, I wrote one sentence. Please provide a complete accounting showing every estate receipt and disbursement, including dates, payees, purposes, invoices, reimbursements, interim distributions, reserve accounts, and related party transactions. I will not sign the proposed release until I receive and review the supporting records. I sent it at 12:47 in the morning. Her response arrived 6 minutes later. No beneficiary is entitled to audit every hour I spent caring for Mom. That was the first time she identified the missing money with her caregiving. It was also the first time I understood that Denise did not hear my request as a question about administration. She heard it as a challenge to the moral authority she believed caregiving had purchased. The next morning, I called Rachel Kim, a probate attorney recommended by our company's general counsel. I brought Denise's email, the filed inventory, the house closing statement, and my preliminary reconciliation to Rachel's office. She reviewed the release first. "Who does Thomas Bell represent?" she asked. "Denise, I suppose. But he's the estate attorney. He has answered some questions for both of us." Rachel set the release down. "Thomas advises Denise in her capacity as executor and assists with the estate administration. He does not represent you personally." I felt foolish for how surprised I was. For 11 months, I had treated Thomas's presence as proof that both sisters were protected by the same process. "What does the $380,000 mean?" I asked. "It means we need records," Rachel said. "Not accusations, not conclusions. Records." She pointed to my spreadsheet. "This is a useful gap analysis. It is not a finding of theft. Some of these amounts may be legitimate expenses. Some may still be held for the estate. Some may be interim distributions. Your sister may have valid claims for services, but you should not approve an account that does not disclose them." Rachel sent a formal request that afternoon. The probate docket also showed that 4 months after our mother's death, and within Ohio's 6-month creditor claim period, Denise had presented a 1-page personal claim for caregiver and household management services in the amount of $160,000. The filing preserved the existence and amount of the claim, but no detailed schedule had been attached, and no probate court order allowing it appeared before Denise paid herself. Rachel asked for the estate bank statements, check images, the filed caregiver claim, all supporting schedules, related party contracts, invoices, interim distribution records, reserve account information, and support for every payment made to Denise, or any business in which she had an interest. Denise answered by copying 3 relatives. Maya has decided that the years I gave Mom have no value unless they fit inside one of her spreadsheets. I did not respond to the family. I responded only to Denise and Thomas. I support fair compensation for documented care and legitimate estate services. Please provide the requested schedules. 2 days later, Denise sent a caregiver calendar. The first page showed a total claim of $160,000. The calendar looked official until I read it closely. It covered 3 years in monthly blocks and assigned hours to meal preparation, transportation, medication supervision, overnight availability, household management, medical coordination, and general support. Many entries were round numbers. 4 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. Whole weeks contained the same sequence repeated from Monday through Sunday. I knew Denise had done real work. When our mother stopped driving, Denise took her to many appointments. She handled grocery runs on weekdays. She met home health nurses and coordinated repairs. She answered late-night calls when Margaret became frightened or confused. I visited on weekends, paid complicated bills, appealed insurance decisions, and took time off for major appointments. But Denise had carried more of the physical routine. That truth made the calendar harder to question, not easier. Erin Miles, the forensic accountant Rachel hired, did not begin by calling it false. A reconstructed schedule is weaker than a contemporaneous one, he said, but family caregivers rarely maintain payroll quality records. We compare it against independent dates. We obtained hospital admission records, rehabilitation dates, home health logs, appointment histories, and the bills I had managed. During several periods when Denise claimed daily meal preparation, medication supervision, and overnight home availability, our mother had been living in an inpatient rehabilitation facility. During another claimed period, Margaret was hospitalized after a fall. Facility staff provided meals, transportation, and medication. Denise could still have visited, attended care conferences, managed the house, and handled administrative work. The records did not prove she had done nothing. They proved the hours could not all have happened as billed. Erin separated the claims into personal care, administrative support, travel, household management, and institutional overlap periods. He refused to erase Denise's work simply because her records were poor. He also refused to accept $160,000 because she had typed it into a calendar after our mother died. That accounts for part of the gap, I said. $160,000, he answered. We still need $220,000. The next records came from the estate bank statements. Over 7 months, the estate had paid $96,000 to Harbor Home Transitions. Harbor was Denise's company. It was not a fake company. Denise had built it 6 years earlier to help older adults and their families clean out houses, move belongings, arrange storage, prepare properties for sale, and coordinate transitions into assisted living. It employed 6 people, rented warehouse space, and served real clients. I had known Harbor helped empty our mother's house. I had not known the estate paid it $96,000. The invoices listed clean-out labor, packing, transportation, storage, property preparation, inventory assistance, sale coordination, document handling, and executive supervision. Did Denise disclose that her company would be hired? Rachel asked. Not to me. Did you approve rates? No. Did anyone obtain competing estimates? Not that I know. Thomas Bell's file contained no written approval of the total arrangement. There were emails discussing the practical need to remove property before the house sale, but no independent review of Harbor's pricing and no schedule showing how Denise separated her executor work from her company's paid services. Again, Erin did not assume all $96,000 was improper. Harbor employees had worked at the house. We had photographs of cleared rooms, transport records, contractor access, and storage labels. Denise had coordinated cleaners, repairs, donation pickups, and the personal property auction. Then we compared the invoices with employee timesheets and storage contracts. Several monthly invoices showed identical labor totals, even though the employee time records were different. The estate had been billed for storage space nearly twice as large as the unit Harbor leased for Margaret's property. 2 employees appeared on estate invoices during hours their payroll records placed them at unrelated private client jobs. Executive coordination appeared repeatedly without a description of the work performed. Those records did not capture every possible subcontractor hour or Denise's own labor. They did show that the estate had been charged more than the available records supported. When Rachel sent a follow-up request, Denise called me for the first time since the dinner. I let the call go to voicemail. Her message lasted almost 4 minutes. She said I had no idea what it took to empty a house after a parent died. She said Harbor had charged less than an outside company would have charged. She said she had lost clients while caring for our mother. She said I had been able to protect my career because she was available. Most of that was emotionally true. None of it answered why her company's employee records did not match the estate invoices. At the end of the voicemail, her tone changed. "This is exactly why Owen should not have been at that dinner," she said. "You teach him to look at family like an account." I replayed that sentence once. Then I saved the voicemail and returned to the bank statements. The third category appeared as a wire transfer for $74,000 directly to Denise. The memo read, "Beneficiary advance." No corresponding advance had been made to me. When Rachel asked Thomas about it, Denise answered herself. "It is not missing. It comes out of my final share." That could have been true. An unequal interim distribution can be corrected when the final distributions are calculated. If Denise had disclosed the advance clearly, shown it against her share, and preserved enough money for estate obligations, it might have been an accounting issue rather than a larger breach. But Denise's proposed beneficiary summary did not show the advance against her distribution. It buried it inside the unexplained reduction in estate cash. Aaron traced the deposit. Within 48 hours, most of the $74,000 moved from Denise's personal account into Harbor's operating account. The money paid overdue payroll taxes, a vehicle loan, past due warehouse rent, vendor balances, and an insurance premium. The estate became a short-term lender to her business, Aaron said. Was she allowed to use an inheritance advance however she wanted? If it was a properly disclosed and supportable advance against her own distribution, personal use is not the central issue. The issue is whether she had authority to make it, whether the estate remained protected, and whether she disclosed it accurately. That distinction mattered. I was not entitled to monitor how Denise spent money that properly belonged to her. I was entitled to know whether money still owned by the estate had been transferred to her without transparent treatment. The fourth category took longer to find. $50,000 had left the main estate account and entered a high-yield savings account Denise controlled. The full balance remained there, plus interest. The account title did not clearly identify the estate. It appeared under Denise's name with a note in the bank profile referencing administration expenses. Denise said she had moved the money to earn a better rate and preserve a reserve for final costs. That explanation was not impossible. The money had not been spent. The estate did need a reserve until taxes, professional fees, and final property expenses were resolved. But the reserve was outside the clearly titled estate account, under Denise's sole control, and absent from the beneficiary summary. Rachel demanded that it be returned to a properly titled estate account. Denise refused. "There are still bills coming," she wrote. "What bills?" Rachel asked. That question produced the document Denise had apparently intended to reveal, only after I signed the release. A final Harbor Home Transitions invoice for $118,000. The invoice described final storage, property management, document handling, sale coordination, and extraordinary transition supervision. Some final services had occurred. Harbor still held several boxes pending distribution. Denise had coordinated access for the buyer and handled a last-minute repair. She had maintained files and answered questions from the auction company. The problem was not that every line was invented. The problem was that the invoice included time periods already covered by earlier Harbor bills, storage months that extended beyond the actual storage contract, and large supervision charges with no supporting schedule. Denise had planned to pay the invoice from the $50,000 reserve and the estate's remaining cash after I signed a release approving all related party transactions. The original $380,000 gap was no longer the whole risk. Another $118,000 was waiting behind my signature. I formally rejected the proposed accounting and release. That was when Denise stopped pretending the records were merely delayed. She sent a private settlement offer through her attorney. She would reduce her caregiver claim, return part of the reserve, charge the $74,000 advance against her inheritance, and waive some of the final Harbor invoice. In exchange, I had to sign the broad release, agree that she had acted in good faith, keep the dispute confidential, withdraw any request for an independent administrator, and waive objections to her executor compensation. Rachel read the proposal and looked at me. This adjusts the dollars without correcting the account. I understood why Denise wanted that. If we resolved everything privately while approving her summary, she could say the accounting had always been substantially correct and that I had created a family argument over presentation. Harbor's records would never be tested. The caregiver claim would remain described as compensation rather than a personal claim requiring proper review. The advance would disappear into a negotiated number instead of being shown openly. I rejected the offer. Within 2 days, the family campaign began. An aunt told me Denise had given up 3 years of her life for our mother. A cousin warned that attorneys would consume the inheritance. Someone else reminded me that I had a good salary and Denise's company was struggling. Brooke sent a message saying the dinner incident was being used to justify an attack that had nothing to do with Owen. I wrote one response in the family group. Documented care deserves fair compensation. An incomplete accounting does not deserve my approval. Then I left the conversation. Brooke contacted me privately the following afternoon. She asked to meet at a cafe 2 blocks from my office. I didn't know the amount, she said when we sat down. I knew Mom got an advance. She said you were getting one too. I wasn't. Brooke closed her eyes for a moment. She admitted Harbor had been under serious pressure before the transfer. 2 major clients had delayed payments. Payroll taxes were behind. The warehouse landlord had threatened default. Brooke had worked occasional shifts at our mother's house and believed the estate was paying Harbor. But Denise told her I had approved the arrangement. Did you ever see my approval? No. Did you ask me? No. Brooke twisted the paper sleeve around her coffee cup. I thought if your lawyer had a problem, someone would say something. I did not have a lawyer. She looked up. Thomas represented the executor. That distinction surprised her for the same reason it had surprised me. Our family had treated the existence of a probate lawyer as if it converted every informal decision into a protected one. I did not ask Brooke to report on her mother. I asked whether she still had her Harbor timesheets and work messages from the estate jobs. She did. Those records confirmed that Harbor performed actual work. They also confirmed several duplicated billing periods. Brooke began crying before I said anything. I sat there when she made Owen leave. Yes, I thought if I said something, she would turn on me next. That may be true. It was not forgiveness. It was the first honest sentence she had offered. By then, Aaron had completed the combined schedule. The original discrepancy consisted of 4 identifiable categories. $160,000 in caregiver reimbursements, $96,000 paid to Harbor Home Transitions, $74,000 transferred to Denise as an advance distribution, $50,000 held in the separate reserve account, exactly $380,000. Seeing the total broken apart changed the shape of the case. Denise had not moved one lump sum into a hidden account. She had occupied several roles and allowed money to move through each of them. She was the executor authorizing payments, the beneficiary receiving an advance, the caregiver claiming compensation, the owner of the vendor billing the estate, the sole controller of the reserve intended to pay that vendor again. The records did not prove that every dollar was improper. They proved that Denise had turned our mother's estate into a customer, a lender, a source of business liquidity, and an early inheritance fund, while controlling the accounting that was supposed to disclose those relationships. That was the midpoint I had resisted reaching. I had begun by asking whether Denise paid herself too much because she felt unappreciated. The evidence showed something broader. Harbor was struggling. The estate had become part of Denise's business financing. The caregiver claim, related party invoices, advance distribution, and reserve were not isolated shortcuts. Together, they formed a system in which Denise decided what she was owed, paid herself through different categories, and expected my gratitude to prevent review. When Rachel requested mediation and reserved the right to file formal objections, Denise accused me of trying to remove her as executor. "I'm asking for a correct accounting," I said in our only direct conversation that month. "You want a stranger to finish Mom's estate. I want the person finishing it to separate personal claims from executor decisions. You think I stole from her. I think you paid yourself in several roles without giving me the records, because you would have said no." That was the closest she had come to an admission. Not that every claim was false, that she believed disclosure was optional if she expected disagreement. A week later, Denise said she would resign immediately and leave me to clean up the mess. Rachel explained that resignation would not erase the existing account. The estate still required complete records, reconciliation, proper handling of remaining funds, resolution of related party transactions, and approval of a corrected accounting. Denise could ask to resign. She could not resign the past. The possibility of a neutral successor became practical rather than punitive. Still, I had my own failures to account for. I had accepted informal spreadsheets because demanding schedules felt cruel after Denise's caregiving. I had signed one earlier consent without independent advice. I had never asked whether Harbor was being paid. I had assumed Thomas Bell's presence protected both beneficiaries. I had let Denise describe every financial question as a judgment of how much she loved our mother. At work, I would never have accepted those controls. With family, I had mistaken avoidance for trust. That did not approve the transactions retroactively. It did explain why they had gone unchallenged long enough to become $380,000. Aaron's final preliminary reconciliation did not give me the clean moral answer some relatives expected. Of the $160,000 Denise claimed for caregiving, approximately $52,000 appeared potentially supportable after accounting for documented travel, medical coordination, household management, and periods of direct care. Of the $96,000 paid to Harbor, approximately $41,000 appeared supportable through employee labor, actual storage, transport, contractor coordination, and market rate services. The remaining amounts were disputed because of reconstructed hours, institutional care overlap, duplicated labor, inflated storage, vague supervision charges, and inadequate related party disclosure. The $74,000 advance had to be shown fully against Denise's inheritance. The $50,000 reserve remained estate money and needed to return to a properly titled account. Most of the proposed final Harbor charge lacked support in its current form. Legitimate final services could still be submitted separately. Accuracy meant Denise was not entitled to everything she claimed. It also meant I could not truthfully say she deserved nothing. The night before mediation, Owen found me at the kitchen table with Aaron's schedules spread in front of me. He had grown careful around estate papers. He never touched them without asking, as though the documents had acquired the ability to accuse him. "Are you trying to take Aunt Denise's inheritance?" he asked. "No." Brooke said her mom might lose most of it. "Brooke may not know the final numbers." He sat across from me. "Some of the money may properly pay Aunt Denise for caring for Grandma," I said. "Some may properly pay Harbor for work it actually did. Some needs to go back to the estate. The point is that one person cannot decide all of those things alone." He looked toward the framed photograph of my mother on the shelf. All I wanted was to know what happened to the chest. That sentence brought me back to the beginning more clearly than the accounting did. Denise had trained the family to hear every question as greed because greed was easier to defend against than scrutiny. "I'm not using what happened to you as leverage tomorrow," I said. "Good. You are allowed to be angry." "I am." He stood, came around the table, and rested his chin briefly on the top of my head, the way he had when he was 12 and already taller than I was. "Just don't make them say I caused it. You did not cause any of this." The mediation took place in a conference suite several blocks from the probate court. Owen did not attend. Brooke did not attend the accounting portion. There would be no relatives in the hallway waiting for a dramatic confession. No audience, no dinner table. Denise sat across from me with her personal attorney. Thomas Bell sat near the end of the table to address the estate files and the advice he had received from Denise. Rachel sat beside me. Aaron had 2 binders and a digital presentation. The mediator, a retired probate judge named Helen Sutter, began by stating what the meeting would not do. It would not determine criminal liability. It would not decide who loved Margaret more. It would not turn every undocumented service into a gift or every irregular payment into theft. It would determine whether the parties could resolve accounting objections, restore estate funds, identify supportable claims, and create a process capable of closing the estate correctly. Aaron began with the original inventory and the expected cash available before final distribution adjustments. Then he placed 4 boxes on the screen. Caregiver reimbursements, $160,000. Harbor home transitions payments, $96,000. Beneficiary advance, $74,000. Reserve account, $50,000. Total, $380,000. He placed the pending harbor invoice beneath them in a separate box. $118,000, not yet paid. Denise shifted in her chair. "Putting them together like that makes ordinary care look criminal," she said. Aaron did not react. "I am not characterizing them together. I am reconciling the difference between the estate's expected funds and the beneficiary summary. Each category has a different legal and accounting treatment." The mediator turned to Denise. "Which role authorized the caregiver payment?" "I was executor." "And who presented the claim?" "I did." "As caregiver?" "Yes." "You presented the claim within the creditor period," the mediator said. "Was it allowed by the court before you paid it?" Denise looked toward Thomas. Thomas answered carefully. "The 1-page claim was filed, but I was not provided the full caregiver schedule before the payments were made. No order allowing the claim had been entered when those payments occurred." Denise's face hardened. "I told you Mom promised to compensate me." "You did," Thomas said. "That is different from receiving the full schedule and seeking approval of a fiduciary's personal claim." Denise turned back to the mediator. "My mother said for years that she would make it right." "I believe she may have said that," I said. Everyone looked at me. It was important to say the part that supported Denise. "She knew you carried more daily care." She was grateful. "I am not asking anyone to treat those years as worthless." Denise's eyes filled, but her posture remained rigid. "Then why are we here? Because gratitude is not an amount you get to calculate alone after she dies." Aaron presented the medical and rehabilitation timeline. He identified supported administrative tasks and direct care periods. He also identified dates when the reconstructed calendar billed home services that could not have occurred as described. Denise argued that she visited the rehabilitation facility, handled bills, cleaned the house, and stayed available by phone. Aaron agreed. His reconciliation included those activities where evidence supported them. It did not include 12 hours of home care on days Margaret was receiving 24-hour institutional services. The argument lasted nearly an hour, but it did not collapse into the simple question of whether Denise had cared for our mother. She had. The question was which services the estate could support and what process was required before the executor paid her own claim. We moved to Harbor. Denise presented photographs of the house before and after cleanout, storage labels, employee records, and vendor receipts. The photographs showed difficult work. Our mother had kept nearly everything. Harbor's team had removed furniture, boxed documents, coordinated donations, transported fragile items, met contractors, and prepared rooms for the sale. Aaron accepted the supported labor, storage, transport, and coordination. Then he showed the duplicated hours, inflated storage quantities, and unexplained supervision charges. Denise said business invoices included overhead. "They can," Aaron said, "but the estate was entitled to understand the related party rate structure and distinguish the company's services from the executor's ordinary administrative work." Brooks' timesheets appeared on the screen. They confirmed real labor and confirmed that 2 billing periods overlapped. Denise stared at the schedules without speaking. The mediator asked whether she would accept $41,000 as the supported harbor amount, subject to documentation of any additional legitimate subcontractor costs. No, Denise said. That does not account for what I lost by putting other clients aside. That is not the same as what Harbor provided to the estate, Rachel said. I made Mom's house sale possible. No one disputes that, Rachel answered. The estate still does not become responsible for every loss your company experienced. The $74,000 advance was more direct. Denise agreed it should be charged against her final inheritance. She insisted she had always intended that. Then why was it not shown against your distribution? I asked. The summary was preliminary. It came with a final release and 10-day deadline. She looked away. The mediator asked about the transfer into Harbor. Denise said she had expected the estate distribution to occur quickly and treated the advance as money she would soon receive anyway. But it was still estate money when you authorized the transfer, the mediator said. Denise did not answer. The $50,000 reserve was resolved with less argument. The funds still existed. Denise agreed to return them to a properly titled estate account within 3 business days. Then Aaron opened the pending $118,000 invoice. The room became quiet for a different reason. The invoice included services previously billed, storage beyond the period supported by the contract, and broad transition supervision charges. Denise admitted she planned to pay it after I signed the release. I expected to revise it, she said. Before or after payment? The mediator asked. Denise's attorney placed a hand over his notes. We can stipulate that the invoice will not be paid in its present form. That sentence removed the largest remaining threat. Legitimate final services would be resubmitted with dates, labor support, third-party charges, and clear separation from executor duties. The rest would be rejected. By late afternoon, the numbers had stopped moving dramatically. That did not mean the meeting became easy. Denise wanted her full executor fee. Rachel argued that incomplete disclosure, self-payment, poor account titling, and related party failures justified a reduction. Thomas acknowledged that his advice had depended on incomplete information from Denise. The mediator warned that continued litigation could lead to formal objections, additional costs, and a court reviewing Denise's administration in detail. Denise looked at me. You did all this because I made Owen leave one dinner. No, I said. That night made me stop assuming your definition of family came with accurate numbers. He was not a beneficiary. That did not make him disposable. This is probate, Maya. The will matters. It does. You used it strictly to decide who deserved a chair. Then you used the estate account to give yourself every seat at the table. No one reacted for effect. Aaron turned the page to the corrected distribution schedule. That was what I wanted. Not applause. A schedule that could survive the room after the sentence was forgotten. The final framework took another 2 weeks to put into writing. The parties would submit an agreed allowance of approximately $52,000 for caregiver services to the probate court as part of the settlement and corrected accounting. Approximately $41,000 of harbor services would be treated as supportable, with a narrow opportunity to document additional third-party costs. Unsupported caregiver reimbursements and harbor charges would be repaid to the estate or offset against Denise's distribution. The $74,000 advance would be charged fully against her inheritance. The $50,000 reserve would return to the estate account. The proposed $118,000 charge would be rejected except for separately documented final services. Denise's executor compensation would be reduced. The parties would jointly ask the probate court to accept Denise's resignation after a proper accounting and appoint a neutral successor administrator to complete the remaining accounting and distribution. I would sign a limited release only after the corrected schedules, transfers, reserve return, and successor appointment were complete. Money returned did not come directly to me. It returned to the estate. The estate would pay proper expenses and then distribute the remainder according to the will. That distinction mattered because I was not collecting a penalty from my sister. I was insisting that our mother's property pass through the process she had chosen. The consequences were not clean enough to satisfy the relatives who had chosen sides. Denise was not arrested. She did not lose her house. Harbor did not disappear overnight. She retained an inheritance reduced by the $74,000 advance, repayment offsets, professional costs, and lower executor compensation. Harbor absorbed the unsupported billing adjustments and continued operating. I paid for the delay too. My distribution remained tied up for months. The estate incurred successor administrator expenses that would not have existed if I had demanded formal schedules earlier. I spent evenings reviewing my mother's final years as units of time. Hospital dates, miles driven, checks written, and hours someone claimed to have worked. Grief became a category no accounting schedule knew how to hold. After the required notice period, the probate court accepted Denise's resignation upon the corrected accounting and appointed a neutral successor. Denise and I spoke during the court-approved turnover at Harbor's warehouse. The successor's team was tagging estate boxes for independent storage, and the shelf where Margaret's cedar chest should have been was empty. Denise held a ring of storage and estate keys. "I really did care for her," she said. "I know. You got to leave." "That is also true," her voice sharpened. "Then why was there no room in your numbers for what that cost me?" "There was room for what you could support. There was not room for you to set the amount, approve it, pay it, hire your own company, take an advance, control the reserve, and ask me to release all of it without records." She looked toward the empty shelf. "Mom would hate this. She would hate that we cannot trust each other." Her eyes filled. For most of my life, I would have rushed to comfort her and reduce the discomfort before she had to remain inside it. I did not. Denise signed the turnover sheet, sealed the listed keys in an envelope, and confirmed that the cedar chest did not appear on Harbor's inventory. Then she folded her arms. Owen made that chest into a bigger issue than it was. He asked where it went. He asked in front of everyone. He was 16. You were the executor. Denise looked down at the concrete floor. Brooke says he still will not speak to her. He will decide when he is ready. He made that dinner sound worse than it was. He did not have to make it sound like anything. 6 people watched you put his food beside the back door. Her face changed. I was angry. At him. At all of it. That was probably the closest we would come to understanding the dinner. Owen's question had touched the fear Denise was already carrying, that the house, the records, and the estate would soon leave her control. She answered that fear by removing the person with the least power in the room. Understanding did not require minimizing it. 3 days later, during a final sweep of a locked overflow bay that had not appeared on Harbor's first storage list, the Successor's team found the cedar chest behind several boxes labeled "Family Photos, Hold." The discovery did not create another financial twist. The personal property inventory already showed that Margaret had left the labeled photograph albums and a small brass compass to Owen. The will did not specifically give him the cedar chest itself. Denise argued that the chest should be sold with the remaining estate property because it had independent value. I considered fighting for it. Then I remembered what I had promised Owen. I would not turn the chest into proof that he belonged. The successor delivered the photographs and compass to him. The chest was appraised and included in the estate sale. Owen accepted the distinction more easily than I did. "Grandma wanted me to have the pictures," he said. "That is what I wanted." Brooke sent him an apology a few weeks later. She did not excuse herself. She wrote that she had stayed seated because she was afraid her mother would turn on her next, and that her silence had made her part of what happened. Owen read the message and put his phone down. "Do I have to answer?" "No." "Do you think I should?" "I think you should answer only when the answer belongs to you." He nodded. Brooke corrected 2 Harbor time entries and delivered her records to the successor. Harbor absorbed the billing adjustment. Her silence at dinner did not make her liable for transactions she had not authorized. The corrected administration closed 10 months after Denise told Owen he was not entitled to a chair. By then, the reserve had been restored, unsupported amounts returned or offset, Denise's advance charged against her share, and the successor's final account approved. The remaining balance was distributed under our mother's will. My share was substantial. It was not a jackpot for exposing my sister. It was the distribution Margaret intended after valid expenses and documented corrections. I used a small portion to establish a college account for Owen. I showed him the account title and contribution statement. "This came from my distribution," I said. "It is not a secret inheritance from Grandma, and it is not compensation for what happened at dinner. It is money I am choosing to set aside for your education." He read the first page. "Do I have to study finance now?" "No." "Good." I placed the remaining estate documents in a locked cabinet. Not because family records had become shameful, but because access and trust were no longer the same thing to me. Contact with Denise became limited to Margaret's grave marker and the final tax return. We did not celebrate the holidays together, and I stopped explaining the distance to relatives who confused reconciliation with returning to the old arrangement. On what would have been my mother's 79th birthday, Owen and I cooked dinner at home. He made her chicken and rice recipe from a stained index card found inside one of the albums. I made green beans the way she liked them, cooked long enough to offend anyone who believed vegetables should remain crisp. We set 2 plates. While I poured water, Owen opened the cabinet and took out a third. He placed it at the empty end of the table beside a small framed photograph of Margaret laughing in her garden. Then he set the brass compass below the frame. "Is this okay?" he asked. I looked at the third plate. For most of that year, family had been discussed through formal categories: executor, beneficiary, creditor, vendor, caregiver, interested party, successor, administrator. Those words mattered because they defined authority and protected property. The damage began when Denise used one category to decide whether a child deserved dinner and ignored the categories limiting what she could pay herself. "She always has a place here," I said. Owen sat down. We ate without discussing probate. He told me about a history teacher who assigned too much reading and a girl from chemistry who had asked him to a movie. I asked one question too many, and he told me I was making it weird. After dinner, he carried all 3 plates to the sink. He paused beside Margaret's photograph. "I think Grandma would have told Aunt Denise to stop being dramatic." I laughed before I could stop myself. "She might have. And then she would have asked who wanted pie. She definitely would have." We had pie. Later, after Owen went upstairs, I rinsed the last plate and returned it to the cabinet. The estate had needed an accounting because affection could not approve a claim or reconcile a bank balance. Our family needed a table where no one had to prove an inheritance percentage before sitting down, and where caregiving could be respected without turning gratitude into a blank check. Denise had believed control of the records, and the executor title gave her the right to decide who belonged and what she was owed. I had believed refusing to ask questions was a form of kindness. The corrected account did not repair our relationship. It gave the truth a place where silence was no longer required to hold it together. Before turning off the kitchen light, I put Margaret's photograph back on the shelf. The brass compass remained beside it, its needle settling after my hand moved away. Owen's place in our family had never depended on the will. My right to ask where $380,000 went had never depended on whether I needed the money. And Denise's years of real caregiving had never given her permission to stand on both sides of the estate account. The house was quiet when I went upstairs, not empty. Quiet. There was a difference. If your sister had genuinely sacrificed years caring for your mother, but then paid herself without approval, where would gratitude end and accountability begin? Would you have accepted a private repayment to preserve the family, or insisted on a corrected accounting, even if the relationship never recovered? Tell me what you would have done in Maya's place and where you are listening from tonight, your city, state, or country. For more stories about family betrayal, hidden records, quiet strength, and earned justice, subscribe and stay with us. Another story about someone finally protecting the person pushed aside is already waiting. I will see you in the next one.